Well, I don't normally do overtly political takes or videos or whatever like that. I don't normally talk about just politics, but considering everything that's been going on, I think that I should be allowed to have a bit of fun for one day and not talk about super serious news, and instead just play normal political pundit a bit, because at this point, I really don't see a scenario where Trump loses. And I say that as someone who's not particularly fond of either option for president this time around, so I don't really have a dog in the race. I think that I can deal with whoever ends up winning. I think that I could make the case for why it would it could serve my ends, since the way I see it is that this country's kind of going off the cliff anyway, so I kind of just want to get it over with as quickly as possible and rip off the Band-Aid. I'm not really sure who does that more, but I know that neither Biden nor Trump are going to do anything to really slow down the decay of America. But at this point, it seems pretty clear that Trump's going to be the guy, and you would have to lean towards that anyway. Even though I guess you could say that probably the mainstream of the political commentators, against their better judgment, I would think assumed that Biden would be a shoo-in, just because everybody hates Trump, nobody likes Trump, none of us like Trump, so who's voting for him? It's nobody's. It's people who took a chance and know now that they made a mistake, because now we've got middle class Joe from Scranton, who's come in here, and he's going to win back all these people who voted for Trump last time. And Trump didn't win by very much anyway, and he wouldn't have won without Russia. Now we know Russia exists, so people know to watch out for Russian propaganda, so therefore Trump's going to lose. But if you look at this a little more objectively, if you look at it as, well, he's an incumbent president, and every incumbent has won re-election since 1992 in the United States, which in American history, that's a really unique trend. You could also make the other argument that, well, it's not that he's a shoo-in, or rather that he's advantaged because so many incumbents before him have won re-election, but rather that almost it's a disadvantage for him because there used to be a tradition in American politics. It wasn't anything intentional, but we normally didn't go more than 2 presidents in a row serving full 8-year terms. Normally, either somebody would die or something, or they would lose re-election, like George H.W. Bush, and there would be a new president in there. So we're kind of overdue for a one-term president. It's been a long time since we've had a one-term president. But I think that perhaps we should kind of throw that rule out, since one-term presidents really haven't existed in the age of modern media, of the 24-hour news cycle, or since the age of the internet. And I don't know why that is, but I can tell you that we have a fundamentally different political landscape than we did in the Cold War era. During the Cold War, that's really, what we're talking about when we say that, well, there were always one-term presidents every few years. Since the end of the Cold War, there has not been a one-term president. And more specifically, if I may draw some comparisons, more recent, comparisons that I think are actually relevant to the 2020 election, I would ask you to look at 2012. The election where the last incumbent president was running for re-election and successfully fended off their opponent by a comfortable margin. That was an election where there was a lot of enthusiasm against the president. The right wing very much did not like Barack Obama. They hated him. Probably not as much as people hate Trump, but they hated Obama a lot. And that is a character of American politics right now, that whoever the incumbent is, the opposition does not just dislike them and disagree with them. They feel that they are an immediate threat to their safety. Okay. So it's very different from thinking, boy, that Bill Clinton, he's such a lech. I wouldn't let him anywhere near my daughter, so I'm going to vote for Bob Dole. We're well past those days. People feel like if a member of the other party is president, that they're going to die or something, or that their livelihood is going to be taken from them by their political enemies. And so you can always be guaranteed that there's going to be enthusiastic opposition to an incumbent. But in 2012, as we remember, that was not nearly enough to actually unseat that incumbent. Sure, a lot of Republicans were very much hated Obama, but that didn't mean that they liked Mitt Romney. I don't know anyone who in 2012 actually voted for Mitt Romney in the primary, and then once he won the primary, I don't know of anyone who actually liked him very much, who was impressed by Romney, who was like, that Romney guy will make a great president. I don't know anyone, okay? And of course that's just anecdotal, but I've never heard of anyone, in general, throughout, the American right who was a fan of Mitt Romney in 2012. And so, it's not enough just to dislike the incumbent. You have to like the guy who's trying to unseat the incumbent. If people don't like that, the guy who's running, he's not going to win. And Joe Biden is a lot like Mitt Romney. The reason why Joe Biden got the nomination is because it was his turn. The same reason Mitt Romney got the nomination, because Mitt Romney, was a runner-up in 2008 behind John McCain, who was the runner-up in 2004 or in 2000, behind George W. Bush. And so what happens is, the loser from the last primary gets to be the winner of the next primary, and then the loser of that presidential election. Joe Biden, is a candidate who has run for president like 3 times, at least 3 times. And he's, not come anywhere close to winning in his first 2 runs in the Democratic primary. So he doesn't seem to have a ton of support amongst the Democratic base. And then this year, he only got the nomination because it was his turn. Because he was vice president and the party didn't want, Bernie Sanders, the actual, runner-up from 2016, who theoretically, it should be his turn. They didn't want Bernie in there, so they put Biden in. And nobody really cares about him. You could say, well, the old people in Florida, they look at Joe and he says no malarkey, just like them. He's part of their generation. And, I guess in this one specific case in Florida where you have a lot of old people, you could say that is an advantage to have a candidate like Joe Biden who does come across as a true geriatric. And even though Trump is also over 70 years old now, he doesn't come across as quite as old. So the old people can't relate to him in the same way they can Joe Biden. Joe Biden looks like an old person, he talks like an old person. You could say, well, the old people relate to that. So maybe, in that sense, in Florida, Biden, you could say, is more likable. But other than that, when you're talking about the Democratic base, when you're talking about young people, there's no enthusiasm for old Joe. And so everything that I've mentioned has made it an uphill battle for Biden going into this election. And so what he would have to hope for in order to overcome these odds is for some bad news about Trump to come out in the interim, some kind of October surprise, which still might happen, something along those lines that really mars Trump and makes him seem like a lame duck. But so far what's been happening is we've had, for much of this year, these Black Lives Matter riots, which are in effect the Democratic base coming and, rising up against the political establishment in general. These riots have not been pro-Democratic Party riots. They certainly haven't been pro-Republican Party riots. They've been really, just anti-everybody riots. Of course, most notably anti-police. But, if you're anti-police, you got to be anti-Joe Biden and anti-Kamala Harris. For the obvious reasons, crime bill on the case of Biden and, cop Mala in the case of Harris. So all of these riots, all of this energy against the police, all of this, left-wing enthusiasm cannot be effectively channeled by the Biden campaign. They have to try and sweep all this under the rug, which, is very dangerous to them, because not only are they trying, can they not benefit from any of the enthusiasm amongst their base of support, but it's also a liability to them, because this enthusiasm may turn into pessimism about, the state of the Biden-Harris campaign. people who hate the cops look and they say, well, we don't like Trump because Trump is the evil orange man. But then they look and they see Biden and Harris and they think, boy, it's hopeless. Why would we even vote? And so I think that these riots, in effect, for the left-wing base, will suppress the vote. If left-wingers are energized and thinking about these issues, then we're going to be much less likely to, just swallow the bitter pill of voting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, since those two are, a big part of the problem that they are so up in arms over right now. If this election was just about Trump and not about the police, if the police were not issued this year, then I think that would be a much more of a benefit to Biden. But because people are thinking about cops and racism, or, well, I guess that's the way the Democrats try and spin it, is that they try and make it all about race, which, might work to some extent. But I don't think that they can hide the fact that, this movement does not like cops and does not like law enforcement, no matter how much they try and racialize it. Oh, and, even if they do successfully turn the BLM stuff purely into racial stuff, purely into an anti-white movement rather than an anti-cop movement, Joe Biden is a white guy, and Kamala is not the blackest person in the world. She's pretty light-skinned, and she's not what you would call an African-American, because her dad's from Jamaica. So, believe it or not, a lot of black people kind of resent that, because, she's not, what you would call an African-American. And so these riots, I think are doing a lot to turn off Democrats from voting for their own candidate. And that's, with respect to the left-wing base of the Democratic Party. But when it comes to people who are more marginal Democrats, perhaps older people who, were Union Democrats, that sort of thing, people who are not, particularly left-wing but were members of the Democratic Party their whole life, the kinds of people who, Joe Biden should appeal to, or, in theory, he's old Joe from Scranton, middle-class Joe, he likes to call himself. Those people turn on their TV, and what do they see? They see fiery but peaceful protests, also known as riots, riots against the police, riots against law enforcement, riots against private property rights, riots against small businesses. And so these people, likewise, when they see that the Democrats are kind of trying to play nice with this sort of thing, and it's very clear that the riots are being perpetrated by people on the left, not people on the right, that too is going to serve to suppress Democratic voter turnout, or even flip some people to the other side. People who, maybe were left-leaning independents, let's say, or, like I was saying before, Union Democrat types. People who are very much on the fringes of the Democratic Party. Some of them might start to flip over to the other side. But either way, if they stay home or they're voting for Trump, those are less votes for Biden and Harris. And where have the two flashpoints been for the riots? They've been two important Midwestern swing states with, a Union Democrat type of history. You've got Wisconsin and Minnesota. Because the riots started in Minneapolis, and now the latest, string of riots has been in Wisconsin. And these are two states that the Democrats need to win in order to beat back Trump, because Trump not only won Michigan and Ohio and Wisconsin, and was there one more and all that? I don't think so. I think out of the ones that were kind of up in question, obviously Iowa, but Iowa's much easier to flip. But I guess Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, those were the big ones that were really surprising that Trump took last time. But people forget he almost won Minnesota. So with all these riots going on in Minnesota, and ordinary Democrats who live in that state seeing the Democratic politicians not doing a whole lot about the riots, they might be scared into flipping to the other side. And then, of course, you have all of the activists that I've been talking about who are, are going to be energized, or rather, demoralized, and realize that Kamala and Biden are not, sufficiently supporting their movement. So all of this really is a lose-lose for Biden and Harris. I don't see how they can benefit from any of this. And, the locations, the geography of these riots have been especially painful to them, because, it could be possible that these riots in Minnesota and Wisconsin are enough to flip those states red. In the case of Wisconsin, keep it red, but in the case of Minnesota, actually flip it red for the first time. Oh gosh, I can't remember the last time Minnesota voted Republican. I believe Minnesota was blue even in 1984 because that was the home state of, oh gosh, was it Geraldine Ferraro? I think that in '84, because no, I guess it was Mondale that was from Minnesota. Sorry, I'm rambling like an old man, but anyway, Minnesota has been pretty reliably Democrat for a long time, and a big reason for that has been, your union types, because this is still the Rust Belt. The Rust Belt was solidly Democratic because of union support, not because of left-wing ideologues, not because of snotty white urbanites or black people necessarily. Minnesota's a pretty white place if you don't count the Somalis that have been brought in there. It's actually like a really, really, really white place from what I remember. And so I don't think that the black vote is a huge element in statewide politics. So yeah, things are not looking good, and if things continue this course, and according to Kamala Harris, they are. She said, do not expect these riots to stop anytime soon. Don't expect them to stop after the election. Don't expect them to stop before the election. So if she's right, and all of this keeps going on, I just, there's no good options here for old Uncle Joe. So, with that said, if you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So, I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.